Сейчас я хочу пригласить Александру Щепан из Ягеллонского университета. Александра приехала в Израиль и будет нам делать доклад на английском языке.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be a part of this event, and I will be speaking in English. Various memories, histories, and identities intertwine. In case of this place, it is even more visible since it changed its name so many times. And each of these names means something different from different people. For different people. Today, Lviv, the protagonist of my presentation, is a Ukrainian city that cultivates almost exclusively its Ukrainian past. Almost, since also its Austro-Hungarian heritage of Lemberg, German name of the city, is mentioned by local authorities and promotional materials. Yet before 1991, Lwów was a Soviet city. Even before that, until 1945, it was called Lwów and constituted a part of Poland, with a Polish majority of the population. Yet 1/3 of its inhabitants was Jewish, namely 100,000 people speaking primarily Polish and Yiddish. Only 800 of them survived the Shoah. However, this past is invisible in the topography of present Lviv. The role of Jewish district is played for tourists by Żydowska Street, where Jewish life indeed prospered, but rather in the 17th than 20th century. Out of 100 synagogues, 2 survived the war. One of them is now empty and abandoned. The biggest city's Jewish cemetery was destroyed by Soviets and now serves as a major bazaar. The death of the third biggest Jewish community in pre-war Poland is memorialized by a monument hidden behind a bus stop. Another memorial of the Janowska camp doesn't even show on Google Maps, pushed somewhere behind an incarceration facility in the outskirts. In 2018, I participated in an endeavor aiming at restoring this memory, yet in an inherently displaced form. The oral history project Lemberg was undertaken by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington and dedicated to the Shoah in Lwów, remembered by its Polish citizens who left the city after the war due to the forced resettlements. The project was conducted by the representative of the museum, Borbala Kriza, as a supervisor and camera operator, and myself as a researcher and the interviewer. I will briefly present this initiative not only to reflect on forms of remembering in the post-Holocaust and post-Soviet space, but also to show how oral history projects focused on the Shoah are still of essential significance, and analysis of the conditions of possibility of one of them may bring meaningful insight on the political and ethical contingencies of oral history. The Lemberg project was a part of the video testimony initiative launched by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in the late 1990s under the name Perpetrators, Collaborators, and Witnesses. Its goal has been to video record testimonies of the non-Jewish witnesses to the Shoah in Central, Eastern, and South Europe. So far, over 1,900 testimonies have been collected. The Polish edition of the initiative was completed between 1998 and 2010 and resulted in recording 324 accounts. The testimonies of Polish witnesses differ significantly from what we are used to identify as a Holocaust video testimony, namely by default a survivor's tale, focused solely on witnesses' experiences and perspective, often conducted from a psychoanalytical angle. On the contrary, these interviews are quite short, circa 30 minutes long, and less focused on the autobiographical histories of the witnesses themselves, rather than on the facts related to the event in question. The interviewee is therefore more literally an eyewitness than the witness per se, a figure examined so intensely 20th century philosophy, literature, and film. The Lemberg project nominally served as a second opening of the Polish chapter of the Perpetrators, Collaborators and Witnesses program, yet it was designed in an entirely different manner. This time we focus solely on one place, construed not only as a site of extermination but also of abandoned Jewish life. The fates of the Jewish citizens of Lwów, I will use the Polish name of the city following my interviewees, were to be narrated by their Polish neighbors, however, who had been expelled from the city after the war due to the changes of borders agreed at the Yalta Conference, and whose own life and experiences were considered a legitimate topic of the interview as well. Post-war displacement constituted thus an important factor. Were the Poles forced to resettle more aware of the experience of their Jewish co-citizens? Can the experience of own vulnerability make a person understand better the other's suffering which she witnessed? The preliminary research question proposed by the museum team was quite narrow, namely the Polish memory of two Lwów pogroms that happened after entering the city by the German army in summer 1941. The first pogrom was triggered by German forces and executed by the Ukrainian auxiliary police as well as ordinary crowd, as a revenge acted upon Jews accused to be responsible for the massacres carried out by the Soviets in 3 city prisons. The second pogrom happened about a month later, when it was permitted to torture, kill and rob Jews without fear of reprisal. During both events, between 6,000 and 9,000 Lwów Jews were murdered. The atrocities committed during these days were uncountable and overwhelmingly visible. Hundreds of Lwów Jews were forced to clean the streets, crawl on their hands and knees, carry the bodies out from the city prisons. Moreover, they were thoroughly documented by Nazi officers, and their visual representations, especially pictures showing extreme violence toward Jewish women, have been preserved and circulated until today. The iconic event of the pogroms was meant to be an epitome of the catastrophe of the Shoah in Lwów, memory of which we were seeking. The assumption of its maximum visibility has been based on the simple fact of the pre-war structure of the city population and its topography. As I mentioned before, Lwów had the third largest Jewish community in Poland, constituting 1/3 of the total number of citizens, who lived both in more traditional north part of the city and mixed with Poles and Ukrainians, often in the most affluent neighborhoods, creating Lwów intelligence and bourgeoisie. Also, the process of extermination was everything but invisible. Firstly, over 1,000 Jews from the whole city had to move by foot to the ghetto. Secondly, the ghetto wasn't fully bordered. Moreover, there was a tram line passing through it to the open swimming pool in Zamarstynów. Thirdly, moving tram platforms filled with Jewish victims to and from Janowska camp were part of the everyday landscape. Finally, an unbearable stench of burning bodies brought by the wind from the killing sites in the outskirts was an element of the mundane. That Shoah-centered perspective decided on the choice of the witnesses and significantly determined the way of conducting the interviews. I found most of our 28 interviewees born between 1914 and 1936 via several branches of the Association of Friends of Lwów and Eastern Borderlands and the organizations bringing together Poles in Ukraine. The easiest way to single out those who could have seen something was the Lwów topography. If a person had lived in Zamarstynów, Kleparów or Podzamcze, poor neighborhoods in the north part of the city, it was quite probable that she was a witness to the Shoah. Some interviewees were recommended to me by both professional historians and oral history enthusiasts who were interested in different topics, therefore they shared their sources with relevant ease. Yet my position as a witness seeker and then interviewer was quite peculiar. I started my pursuit in early January 2018 and I met several witnesses for a preliminary interview. But in the meantime, a serious historical turbulence occurred, the so-called Holocaust Bill, according to which it would be illegal to accuse the Polish nation or state of complicity in the Nazi Holocaust. Was signed and it triggered an international debate. When we met in January, Mr. A was quite eager to talk. Moreover, short preliminary interview revealed, even for himself, knowledge he had been so far quite blind to, namely about the fate of his feminist Jewish neighbors from the affluent Kadecka street. As it turned out, he was even in possession of books for children, given to him by a member of this family when they had to move to the ghetto. We decided that those books would be presented by him during the official interview scheduled for February. Yet nothing like this happened. Mr. A resigned, despite my numerous efforts. After the Holocaust bill upheaval, his family told him it would be better not to get involved in such sensitive matters. Mrs. B, whose mother allegedly saved a Jewish child during the war, was very suspicious towards me from the beginning. I represented for her Jewish interests, yet she was willing to give the interview. In February, however, she called me a traitor over the phone and was openly aggressive towards taking up the Jewish side in the conflict. Some other witness excused herself as being tired of those matters. Another was afraid of undermining Polish good name by possible reckless utterances. One witness, already being recorded, decided not to share knowledge I was aware she possessed, for instance about pre-war anti-Semitism in Lwów, since she was afraid of making Poland look bad. Being a witness to the Shoah turned out to be, more than any time before, a shameful matter, a dark secret that could taint its career and turn him or her against their own community. I do not have to mention that historian from the Institute of National Remembrance, who promised to give me some names, did not want to talk to me anymore. This situation also changed my acquired persona. Since February, while introducing myself to a potential witness for the first time, for the sake of breaking the ice, I used more often the expression museum dedicated to the Second World War based in Washington, since Holocaust became an unspeakable name. In these preliminary conversations, I would have rather asked about the multi-ethnic character of Lwów and neutralized Jews with Ukrainians and minorities. Was I policing myself for a good reason? Willing or not to diagnose the field, I was playing the same Polish game of banning Jewish experience from an open site. Game of ellipses, euphemisms, conspiratorial hints, implied meanings. Certainly, it was not a rule without exception. There were cases when an international renowned American institution could have played a role of an asset, especially in case of interviewees who represented academia or considered themselves witnesses of history. On the other hand, our task was to record the pre-war generation of Lwów Poles, also as material witnesses, namely incarnation of a certain mindset, culture, education, and worldview that preceded the Shoah and defined its interpretation during and after the events. Therefore, I encouraged witnesses to sing anti-Semitic songs, or repeat slurs or rhymes, if they knew any, to describe how to recognize a Jew. Playing an idiot method, so effective in oral history, posed in this case an interesting dilemma regarding the level of trust between interviewee and the interviewer, telling also a lot about the national, class, or gender communities they both belong to. I would have then lead Danuta Jaworska on to mimic a Jew in a clearly anti-Semitic manner, but also question Anna Sucharda, a daughter of the rector of Lwów Polytechnic University, about her enlightened family who yet would not make friends with Jews and accept their son's membership in a fascist organization, National Radical Camp. So it also became obvious that there is no such an entry as anti-Jewish events of summer 1941 in Polish biographic and collective memory, and witnesses often did not realize the specificity of these events. There are two main reasons for this situation. Firstly, violence towards Jews was present on the streets of Lwów during the whole period of the Nazi occupation. Therefore, we received many stories about atrocities without a specific time frame. It is worth to mention that shared conviction among the Polish witnesses is that the ones responsible for killings were always Germans and Ukrainians, never Poles. Secondly, the first pogrom in Lwów was remembered rather as an opening of the prisons, where many families had their relatives incarcerated, as searching for the bodies of fathers, brothers, and husbands. Moreover, July 1941 in Polish collective memory is strongly related to the massacre of Lwów professors, when 25 Polish and Jewish academics, along with their families, were killed by Nazi German occupation forces. Even superficial analysis of the recorded interviews leads to the conclusion that Polish and Jewish, as well as Ukrainian memory about Lwów past are strikingly separate. The dominant trajectories of the collective Polish memory of the eastern borderlands are the narratives of nostalgia after the lost territories, very often accompanied by reactionary political views and strong anti-Ukrainian sentiments. The witnesses are trained by their national memory culture to reinterpret their lives in frames or either victimhood or heroism, and the Shoah in these cases is very often not so much repressed as simply not remembered. Thus, the process of extracting the Jewish threads of their memory was often laborious. The Jewish faiths did not occupy the dominant sphere of the perception of the past. Although an image of a peaceful coexistence of Poles, Jews and Ukrainians before the war was more than common, collected accounts prove the general separation of Polish and Jewish lives, exhibited in lack of memories of Jewish friends or neighbors, unexplained disappearances, ignorance regarding the existence of the ghetto, frequently mistaking Janowska camp for the ghetto. Furthermore, the witnesses tended to underline Polish generosity and eagerness to help their Jewish co-citizens, especially in easily claimed smaller gestures, like bringing food to the ghetto, offering a place to hide but only for a very short period. Quite rare are accounts openly addressing the problem of Polish complicity. Commonly shared is the opinion that Polish and Jewish faiths were similar and Poles would have been next to extermination. We deal here, therefore, with a scandal of invisibility of Jewish tragedy that happened throughout the city of Lwów. Yet this blindness has its specific factors. One of them would be gender. Boys saw more than girls since they had more freedom to wander in the city. Second, class. Kids from lower social stratum could have observed more since they were much more mobile and their parents were usually absent at work. Third, age. Memories of younger witnesses are more of visual imprint, not much processed by interpretative templates. Yet the invisibility is also fueled by cultural clichés. For instance, Zbigniew Janczarski portrayed his experiences in a Batiars, Lwów hooligans, manner, as a string of adventures, illegal trade with the ghetto via secret passages, stunts on the verge of exposure. A kind of adventure narrative may also be spotted in the stories of Germans, or maybe Polish or Ukrainian blackmailers, who ordered boys and men to undress in order to check if they were circumcised. The obscenity of this scene compels the interviewees to tell this story as an indecent joke, and the real reason and consequences of these controls remain understated. Moreover, these cultural screens may be more literal. Most of the witnesses would mention Lwów sewers, where Jews were hiding, yet without valuable details. This is certainly an after-image of Agnieszka Holland's film In Darkness, rather than element of their own experience. Zbigniew Lang told us a very powerful story of Jews of Zamartynowska Street cleaning the road with toothbrushes. Did he really see it? Or again, In Darkness took its imaginative toll. The Lemberg project demonstrated that Poles who witness the Shoah are usually bystanders, and being a witness to the pain of the other seems to remain for them an unlived experience. Yet, along with a scandal of invisibility during the interviews, we encounter the opposite, the scandal of visibility. Maria Mokrzyc spent months during German occupation with her Jewish friend Bożena Kramer, and this experience of almost identical but painfully different lives permanently influenced her perception. When she recalls the execution of Jewish women, which I witnessed, she states, "I had Bożenka in front of my eyes." Wacław Kijowski lived just to the ghetto's gate and visited it regularly with his grandma, a medic. His memories are complex, vivid, and devastating. He is a subscriber of Nasz Dziennik, strongly anti-Semitic daily. This, however, does not interfere with his passionate studies on Lwów Shoah. "Nobody speaks what happened to Jews in Lwów," he repeated several times. Finally, Tadeusz Torkowski saw a lot but did not understand. Only a visit of the son of his Jewish friend made him reinterpret his own memories from wartime Lwów. Thus, he realized he had been witness to the pogrom in summer 1941, since he saw an elegant Jewish man led by gendarmes towards Łącki prison. He also saw Jewish men beaten by German civilians. Yet there were no German civilians in Lwów yet. So doesn't his testimony speak really about Lwów citizens participating in the pogrom? The Lemberg project exhibited fully a precarious position of Polish witnesses to the Holocaust. sensitive to political change in the present, neither survivors nor bystanders, testifying for and against their community. Rather burdened by the memory they don't want to carry than mourning the people they cared for. Finally, the interviewees are playing with their interviewer an endless game of Polishness. Shifting positions, momentary alliances, code of silence, guilty need of exposure. These negotiations were undertaken in the context of a very specific position of Lwów in Polish collective memory and affective complex, a place of strong identification, an object of nostalgia, yet remaining in a state of heterotopia for both Polish and Jewish history. Although most of my interlocutors used maps of Lwów to narrate their fates of themselves and their Jewish co-citizens, the space they related to has a rather spectral status. The Lemberg project showed the vulnerability of memory of Jewish life and the Shoah in post-socialist cities, not supported by material remnants, often willingly forgotten or misinterpreted in local politics. It relies solely on the memory of survivors and witnesses. Yet both are often somewhere else, and the latter don't even realize what they witnessed. Thank you very much.